Please welcome Zack Abbott from Zbiotics. Thank you so much for coming all the way here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
No, I'm excited to be here. Excited to chat with you.
Let's imagine I meet you in an elevator and I just found out about your new product, but I don't know anything about it. Can you maybe pitch me what it's about in 60 seconds? We're in the elevator.
Sure, yeah. So probiotic that is genetically engineered to break down the toxic byproduct of drinking alcohol that makes you feel not so great the day after drinking. So the idea is you drink this product before you drink. It deals with this toxin so that you can wake up the next day and get more done.
That's your first product.
Yeah.
What about the second product?
Second product is called sugar to fiber. And similar to the first product, we genetically engineered a probiotic bacteria, but in this case, we engineered it to have the function of converting sugar from your diet into prebiotic fiber directly in your gut. So simple sugars from the foods you're already eating are being converted or stacked together into fermentable fibers directly inside your gut. So that's the idea.
So basically, you're trying to solve a problem of people who love sweets.
Well, it's more solving the problem of that of not getting enough fiber in your diet. So one of the most important things you can do for your health is getting enough fiber and to feed your microbiome, and it does a lot of other things too. But it's basically sort of like foundational to kind of gut health, which fundamentally your gut is kind of the foundation of your overall health. 95% of Americans don't get enough fiber in their diet, and that's in large part due to the fact that it's not easy to get enough fiber anymore, given that all of our foods are highly processed and a lot of the fiber's been stripped out, and so it takes a lot of deliberate effort, and it's important to make an effort to have a good diet, but even with good effort, it can be difficult to reach the amount of fiber you want to get, and so we built a product that can essentially turn the foods you're already eating into more fibrous versions of those foods, essentially. And so that's the idea of naturally getting more fiber from the foods you're already eating and increasing the diversity of the types of fiber that you're getting. So you take a fiber supplement and it's sort of bombarding you with one type of a highly processed fiber, but we sort of slow drip a small amount of a very unique fiber to sort of help you reach those goals.
Can you show me the new product?
So the new product is sugar to fiber. So this is it right here, and basically right now it's paper tube, and we have a little stick pack it's just basically in here is our probiotic bacteria, which is engineered to express one type of fiber and then a small amount, mostly as a filler, but because we needed a filler anyway, we made that filler another type or two other types of prebiotic fibers as well. So now you're getting more variety of fiber, even and all that kind of stuff. So the idea is you can mix this into anything. You can mix it into just a glass of water, or a protein shake or your beverage of choice, your morning coffee or tea, or you can mix it into your breakfast cereal, which is what I do, or oatmeal or food or yogurt, whatever you like.
This can go into coffee.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's a live bacteria. So right now it's in this dormant spore form.
It's not gonna die in a hot.
That's what's cool about it. So the bacteria is this it forms this spore that is very resilient and resistant. And so this is something that bacteria naturally does on its own. It's an evolutionary mechanism, so the bacteria can survive really intense periods of starvation, which allow, but also big changes in temperature and acid and your stomach acid and things like that as well. And so what's cool about that is that it can, as long as the water is below about 180 degrees, which is a little bit colder than what you would brew. You brew coffee at around 195 to 200, but you drink coffee at 140 to 160 at the highest. So it can survive at up to 180. So if you can drink it, you definitely can put this in it and it will survive, which is pretty cool. So yeah.
This is cool, but also kind of scary.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I'm hearing, these bacteria, they are very resilient.
Yes, that's true. But these bacteria already exist in your diet every day already. This is the bacteria we use is called Bacillus subtilis. It's natural soil microbe that you literally eat every day of your life already. It's on the surface of everything, of all your frustration festivals. It's all over. It's probably all over your hands right now. Okay. It's something you ingest every day. We've also used it, like humans have used it in food fermentation for hundreds of years, or thousands probably of years. So like foods like natto, which is a fermented soybean food from Japan, kombucha, chocolate, they all use, at least in part, Bacillus subtilis as a fermentative agent. So this is it's basically one of the safest bacteria on the planet. We ingest it and interact with it for all of human history. And so we've just taken that bacteria that you already eat, that already has the ability, it's already like comes with this prepackaged ability to pass through your stomach acid unharmed and then become active in your gut. And we just engineered it so that when it does become active in your gut, it's expressing it's performing one extra function that we know is beneficial to you in some way. So in the case of our first product, that's breaking down this toxic byproduct alcohol. In this case, the second product, it's converting sugar into fiber, which is a very valuable function. Actually, what's cool about this is that with the second product in particular, that function, sugar into fiber, this bacteria actually already naturally does that function. We've just engineered it so that it does it more. It does it like it's more efficient at it and more effective at it and more consistent at it.
Amazing. So basically, from what I understand, you kind of work with the same bacteria strain, right? Like for the first product and for the second product, it's same strain.
Same species, yeah.
Okay, same species, but you basically modified the genes of these bacteria to do different functions. So for the first product, it was to help help me with these ingredients.
Acetaldehyde, right?
Acetaldehyde?
Yes, good,
okay.
Nice. Yeah.
Okay, and for this one, you kind of like augmented the function it was already performing.
Right, exactly. So like sugar into fiber, it kind of sounds, I don't know, it might sound kind of crazy, but fundamentally fibers are just a lot of sugar stacked together into big chains or kind of like branched like bush structures. And so plants and bacteria and yeast have the ability to kind of stack sugars together to build like structures that they use for cell structure and whatever, and so these enzymes already exist, and we as humans don't have the ability to stack sugars or fibers. We have the opposite. We can break some fibers down into their simple sugars and use them as energy. And so we basically just engineered our bacteria to do that function it already does of stacking sugars into fibers, but do that a little bit more efficiently and grab a little bit more of that sugar from your diet and turn that into prebiotic fiber in the gut.
Okay, so if this, funny question, if this bacteria had a Tinder profile, what would it say?
A Tinder profile? I don't know. I don't know. I apologize. I've never been on Tinder. I don't know.
How to make it? Basically, the idea is like how to make it sound sexy. Like basically make the user or make somebody like really want to get it.
Yeah.
But it needs to be super short and short and spicy and sexy.
Okay. I mean, I don't know how sexy fiber is, to be honest with you, but I mean, I guess I make everything healthier and better. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay, it feels more of like a good person, like good, legit.
Yeah.
Like.
They're seeking friendship.
Healthy relationship. Healthy relationship.
Healthy relationship. Yeah. That's it. Totally. Exactly. Yeah. Like I'm here for you every day as a healthy, supportive partner.
I love it. Here you go.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah. We nailed it.
Yeah.
I love this. Can you talk a little bit more about your first product?
Yeah, pre-alcohol is our first product. We launched this in August of 2019. So it's been on the market for, what is that, like 6 or 7 years, or almost 6 years. This product is, as a bacteria that breaks down. So when you drink, your body breaks down alcohol in 2 stages. It converts the alcohol into acetaldehyde and then the acetaldehyde into acetate. And so these 2 steps with 2 different enzymes. And your liver breaks down most of the alcohol you drink. And it does both those steps like really efficiently, which is good news because that intermediate acetaldehyde is highly toxic, much more toxic than alcohol itself. But usually, like, it's just sort of like a necessary step to getting to acetate, which is essentially vinegar. It's innocuous, and like this molecule has now been detoxified from all perspectives. But what happens is that like a small amount of the alcohol you drink gets broken down actually directly in your gut before it can be absorbed in your bloodstream and where your liver has access to it. And the small amount of alcohol that's been broken in your gut is done in large part by the microbes that live in your gut. And they can do that first step from alcohol to acetaldehyde, but they don't do that second step very efficiently. So what happens is that like, even though it's a small amount of alcohol being broken down there, it actually ends up being the major source of acetaldehyde in the body. So colonic levels of acetaldehyde are 10 to 100 times higher than blood acetaldehyde levels. And then what happens is it builds up in the gut, but then it absorbs in the bloodstream. It like wreaks havoc throughout the body, creates all this damage, and then it makes its way to the liver where it's broken down really efficiently, but at that point it's too late. So we engineered a bacteria to express the same type of enzyme that your liver makes to convert this acetaldehyde into acetate in your gut where it's being formed initially. And so that's the idea. So same as the sugar fiber product. This Bacillus subtilis bacteria you already eat every day, performs thousands of biological functions. We engineer it to have one extra function to just deal with this acetaldehyde if it encounters it in your gut. So if you drink this before you drink, and then you drink alcohol, acetaldehyde inevitably is going to form, and then this bacteria can help break that down. And that's the idea.
2 questions.
Yeah.
First of all, what happens if I drink this and I don't drink alcohol? It's just going to sit there and like go through the system.
Exactly. You'll pass it through in a day, and it will do all the things that Bacillus subtilis normally does every day in your body, and it will just make this enzyme that will. This enzyme's only function is to convert acetaldehyde into acetate. So if there's no acetaldehyde around, then the enzyme just won't do anything. And it'll just be sort of like, it'll just do nothing. So
for people to understand, like, what kind of symptoms, because, like, I don't think that, just general public can correlate, this, help me. Acetaldehyde.
Yes, acetaldehyde, exactly.
With the symptoms they're experiencing. I think there's a lot of confusion about hangover and the symptoms and like what causes what. Like people know that they feel bad, but they kind of don't know like what exactly causes like certain symptoms. So like, can you?
Yeah, totally.
Explain that.
I mean, to some extent, it's actually like. To some extent, it's pretty unique to each person, or I shouldn't say unique, but like each person's response is going to be sort of individual to their biology, whatever's going on for them. And so you're right to say that, first and foremost, acetaldehyde is not the only thing that you're dealing with the next day, or is causing the stuff you're dealing with the next day. So the effects that alcohol itself, the ethanol itself, also causes some of like the negative effects you might feel the next day. And so for instance, ethanol, kind of monkeys around with different like excitation and depression signals in your brain, and so that can really affect the quality of your sleep. It also messes with blood sugar storage, with your hormone levels, and including hormones that regulate hunger and satiation. And so like sometimes, alcohol is actually highly caloric, right? But like even, we've all experienced that we've drinking during the night, then we get hungry at the end of the night, even though you've already ingested a ton of calories. And it's because alcohol actually induces expression of a starvation hormone. And so we think we're really hungry and we crave these really like nutrient dense foods, like fatty, carby foods that have lots of calories in them because our body thinks we're starving, even though we're definitely not. So alcohol messes with you in those ways. It affects your sleep. It affects sort of like hormone levels, which can have sort of like interesting kind of like issues, interesting things you might have to deal with the next day. But then you have acetaldehyde, and acetaldehyde is this highly toxic molecule, and so it can literally like bind to proteins in your cell. It can bind to your DNA, and all of that happen. When all that happens, it basically kills your cells, and so it causes cell death, which whatever, cells die all the time, right? But like it can sort of do this systematically, and then you get your body's responding to the cell death like damage, and so it causes inflammation. Exactly. So basically, the next day when you wake up, the acetaldehyde is gone. But it's kind of like the aftermath of a bull in a china shop, right? The bull is gone, but there's broken glass everywhere, right? And your body's like basically spending the whole next day cleaning up. And so when you wake up the next day, why you feel terrible, in part from the acetaldehyde, is due to all this like systemic inflammation and bodily response to like the damage that acetaldehyde created the night before. And so our products goal is to basically prevent the bull from getting into the china shop in the first place, right? Like deal with the bull in your gut before it gets into your bloodstream. And so some of that, like, just honestly, that sort of like toxic death feeling you feel is, and like that lack of motivation to kind of get out there and get things done, and sort of like also that like that sort of guilt and anxiety around all of that actually comes from the acetaldehyde. And so it's not everything, but it's like an important part. And like how people's physical responses to acetaldehyde is going to be like to some extent somewhat different. But generally speaking, like by dealing with that, we're vastly reducing kind of the insults your body is dealing with, which means like you're much more likely to feel better, however your body normally responds. You know, so that's kind of, that's somewhat vague, but ultimately, like everybody's biology is so individual that it's kind of hard to like put like kind of like fine points on that.
No, I feel like what speaks to me is the notion of inflammation. Well, because I do understand, like inflammation, basically, you feel sick in a sense that you like. Feeling sick or like feeling the inflammation in your body can be different for each person.
Exactly.
But I feel like everybody can, like when they're a grown up, right? They're allowed to drink already. They kind of know how inflammation feels in their body. Yeah,
and I mean, you definitely know how you feel the day after drinking, right? And some of that, like I say, and what's been cool for me in experiencing this product for the last like 7 or 8 years is like that. I've been able to start to kind of decouple the different effects, like because before you just kind of dealt with the whole potpourri all at once, right? But now that I've had this product, I can feel the different effects of like acetaldehyde versus alcohol, and so like I might wake up the next day and still feel like groggy and and some other things that kind of deal with the poor sleep, for instance, like. It's funny, like you forget sometimes how important sleep is and how bad you can feel the next day just from not getting good sleep. Like because we pulled all-nighters in college and that wasn't so bad. But like as you get older and you start to pull those all-nighters, like when you wake up the next day, you really feel like not functional and groggy and sort of like pain behind the eyes and things like that. And so I've noticed that like if I drink a lot and I don't prioritize my sleep and I stay up late and I just don't get very good sleep and I don't get very much of it, then I'm still not gonna feel great. Like, but the good news is that like coffee and like something like fresh air and like exercise, those things can sort of like help get me through those things, right? But then these sort of like that other kind of misery that like keeps you on the couch all day, I don't have to deal with. And I think for me, that's the acetaldehyde and that's the inflammation and the things I'm dealing with. So the actual product, so little 14 mil glass bottle. Really easy to take, very minimal flavor. So you just drink this before you start drinking, then you go on and enjoy your night responsibly, and then wake up the next day, and ideally you can get to your morning workout, get all the other things done you're planning to do the next day. Stick to your healthy habits and routines. That's the most important thing. Yeah, I think this could be a really good on the Tinder profile. Oh yeah, the first of many good decisions. Yes. Yeah, totally. So we like that because it sort of cues up the idea. I think people initially, and it's not so much as today as our brand's gotten better established, but like in the kind of initially people were like, oh, is this like meant to be something so I can go out and like drink as much as I want? And it's like, no, like this is not a get out of jail free card. Like I was saying that, acetaldehyde is only part of the problem. So you still have to drink responsibly. You still have to manage your sleep and your diet and make sure you don't drink too much and pace yourself and all those things. But the thing was that before this product, there was no way to deal with the acetaldehyde. And so now we have this that kind of helps you with that. But it's the first of many good decisions. Ideally, you're making other responsible decisions about drinking so that you can wake up the next day. So this is like, I think it's especially cool. And one of the things we've learned is that because you drink that before you start drinking, it's almost like, in addition to the biological effect, it's also like a sort of psychological commitment to your next day. Like before you start drinking, you're drinking this and you're saying like, I'm going to get things done tomorrow. Like I'm committing to my day tomorrow. And so hopefully it sets off sort of a chain of good decisions that results in a good next morning.
So basically another, I don't know, let's say Hinge profile would be like committed to good decisions or like committed to, I don't know. Something.
Yeah, right. Like, yeah, this is like looking for commitment from somebody who's like healthy and responsible and like, I share values with that person or something, something like that. Yeah.
This is funny. Also, I remember the first bottles, they were not transparent, if I'm correct.
Yeah, right. They had we were going for like a sort of like a frosted look. And I think we're gonna try and get back to actually like getting glass that actually is like etched and frosted and then printing directly on the glass. But what we saw was that when we used to have a wrap that they basically gave the look of it. What happened was that like if the bottle broke in transit, the wrap would like hold the bottle together, which was not good. We wanted like if it breaks, you want to be able to see that it's broken, you know. So we moved to a clear glass for that. So it's sort of like more of a safety and logistics thing. But I think it looks nice for sure.
Yeah, it looks nice. Also, I feel like it's nice to see like how much liquid there is.
Yeah.
And then I'm curious, like so when I tried it for the first time, I was surprised how good it tasted.
Oh, good. Yeah, it didn't start that way.
No?
So it's interesting. The funny stories about flavor is so the product actually naturally doesn't really have a flavor. It's pretty neutral. And so when we were beta testing before we ever launched, we would give people the product, and they would just be little, we'd resuspend the bacteria in water and then give it in little vials, and people would drink it and they'd be like, oh, is that just water? And then they would like be very skeptical about the product after that because they thought that like because it didn't taste like anything, it must not have anything in it. And so then when we decided, when we were formulating the product for launch, we were like, okay, well we should put some flavor in there to signal that there's something in it. But we were like, we didn't want to, we really want to lean into the power of the ingredient. We didn't want flavor to be like the draw, like cherry flavored or something like that, right? We wanted it to be something that was unique. And so we sort of tried to get, I think, too cute and creative with the flavor, like the flavor of efficacy or whatever. And so the early feedback on our first iteration of the flavor was like dirty dishwater. It was like people really did not like it, which we were surprised about because we liked it, but apparently others didn't. So then we dialed back the complexity on the flavor. We really we just made it kind of like a single, kind of like slightly tart, like just very like single note kind of flavor, and really mild and not meant to linger or anything like that. So that because you're gonna have a nice glass of wine or a nice, whatever, like whiskey or whatever, cocktail you're gonna have next. You don't want your palate to be blown out with something that's like super sugary or something like that. So.
How interesting. Was it a hard choice, like with the flavors, and like how exactly did you work with the flavors? Yeah,
certainly wasn't an expert at flavor development, and so we worked with, besides being a consumer, and so we worked with a flavor. Do you want to keep this? I don't know.
I have another question.
Oh, yeah, okay. So
I just rememrided.
Oh, okay. So we worked with the formulator, and they were a flavor house, and they prided themselves on like being able to like develop flavors for beverages and stuff like that. And so like, great, we'll work with you on this. And so they took all of our directions perfectly and made something that they gave us lots of different iterations and things to try, and we several rounds of iterating to get to something that we liked, and then we liked it, and then we launched it, and then we got customer feedback, and they didn't like it as much, right? So then we go back to them like, okay, but they were great to work with. They gave us what we wanted. So yeah.
Was it similar to like what you do when you do like wedding cake tasting or something like that?
Yeah, kind of, yeah. It was like, but like they were drawing from this whole lab of like ingredients and like all different kinds of stuff. And so you start with like, just profiles. Like, okay, we want something kind of like earthy and like citrusy or like tart, or like, you sort of give them like kind of the arena of flavor, and then they give you like, 8 options and say like, okay, and you say, okay, I like option 4, but like and then you start tweaking on that. But within 4, let's like make it more of this and less of this and dial this, whatever. So that was kind of how we got to the flavor, and then but you get in your own head about it, and so it's like user testing is really important for sure.
I know that you say this a lot, and I really appreciate that. I will ask more questions about the user experience, but I wanted to ask you first, like, how long can you store this? So, okay, like you buy this, and then it's on your shelf, but maybe you're not that big of a drinker.
Yeah.
Like, how long can you store this?
Yeah, great question. So that's another reason why I really like Bacillus subtilis is like this amazing bacteria. So they actually, when it's in this dormant spore form, which is how it is in the bottle, it can survive almost indefinitely. Like they literally pull the bacteria out of ice cores from old ice shelves and things that are 10,000 years old, and the bacteria are in the spore form, and then you put it on nutrients and it wakes up and it's alive and it's fine. Ours doesn't last that long because it's not sitting in an ice core somewhere. It's in this bottle. The temperature's changing and there's like acid in the bottle, and so that like slowly erodes it and things like that. So we found that through careful testing that we put a shelf life on this of 18 months, and that's from when it's been bottled. So a year and a half from when it bottled. But obviously, after we bottle it, it sits in our warehouse and we have to ship it to you, and it takes time. So we typically try to get it to you with at least 12 months of shelf life, if not, and oftentimes more shelf life than that, 15 months or something. So when you get it, you should have at least a year to use it.
Oh, very nice, very good shelf life. I'm curious, like, so another kind of like consumer request actually from my side.
Yeah, as a user.
Yeah, as a user, I was always wondering, like, why cannot I just go to a bar and ask for a pre-alcohol drink before my drink?
We're working on it, and so we have like some like high-end, like we're focusing on, it's important to establish credibility as part of the problem, right? So you believe in the product, but there's a lot of snake oil that's been out there for the last like 30, 40 years, and so most customers, if they don't know about the product or they've never tried it or never heard of it, they assume it's the same sort of, random vitamins and plant extracts that don't work, and so they're just very skeptical. And so if you just kind of put it in a random bar, people are like, what's that junk? And they probably won't believe in it or won't buy it or anything. So starting with places where there's a lot of credibility and where like the staff and the bartenders have really bought in like genuinely, and so they can talk authentically about the product to the customers and stuff like that. So working on sort of a strategy to kind of build that up. So that's in the works, and we are at some high-end like restaurant and bar, like cocktail bars and things like that now.
In San Francisco. I want to know the location.
Yeah.
I'm gonna test it.
Yeah. I don't think that there are any bars or restaurants in San Francisco. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't think so. But we are at like Noe Valley Wine and Spirits, so we are at like a liquor store, a high-end liquor store in Noe Valley. So I know we're at least there, and I think and we just launched in Earth Bar, which is like a smoothie shop that's like often associated with Equinox gyms, and so we have most of the Earth Bars in LA, and then a couple in San Francisco as well. So those are like the places where you can get it in retail in San Francisco right now. But hopefully someday you can get it, at lots of different kind of places where you're actually going to be drinking.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, you forget, or like your plans change.
Totally.
Suddenly,
Yeah.
You didn't plan to be drinking. You didn't take this with you, and you show up at a bar and like, do you have Zbiotics by any chance? And they're like, of course.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, because right now, right, it's like you gotta like order it online. It has to be shipped in like 3 days, and then you have to receive it, and then you have to remember to bring it with you or drink it before you leave. It's a lot of planning that a lot of people don't do with their drinking, which totally understand, not ideal. And so like, but we're working against, as I say, just like a lot of consumer skepticism, and so. And that extends to the retailers too. They're sort of skeptical. They're like, well, these don't sell well. People don't believe in them, and because they categorize us as everything else, right? Like when we launched this, it was the world's first ever genetically engineered probiotic to ever go to market. This is the first time that like modern biotechnology has been applied to this problem.
Yeah, you should be showing this like first ever.
The world's first ever, right? Like we actually invented a product to solve the problem, right? Before this, people were just sort of like sweeping things off the shelf into a bottle and like kind of just trying to sell it with a good story. And so convincing people that this is different is something that takes a little bit of time. So we're working on it. But ideally when there's a good amount of awareness and a good amount of trust built in the brand, that's when I think, we'll be able to successfully kind of be in these places. And this is like a major focus for us this year and next year is like the retail push and the on-premise push.
Amazing. So I'm curious, I remember you talking about, how you first pitched and like how you figured out your idea. So I'm curious, and also I know that you applied to some sort of accelerator. So you got like your first investment from an accelerator, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Can you briefly give me a pitch, like a short pitch that you did like for when applying for your first accelerator?
Well, applying for the first time, it was really different than it is today,
That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
I'm really curious.
Yeah. It was like, that was like 9 years ago. And so at that time, I was a scientist. I did my PhD in microbiology. And so what I was pitching was very science heavy, right? It wasn't like, I knew I wanted to make consumer products, but like what I was pitching initially was the technology and the platform I was building, this idea that we could take probiotic bacteria and then convert them into these protein factories. And so that was what I was pitching, right? This idea of my pitch, what used to be, it's not a very good pitch, admittedly, but it used to be that like essentially that, I think it was in 2006, 2 of the top 10 best-selling drugs were biologic drugs. And so biologic drugs are complex molecules like proteins or living biotherapeutic products, as opposed to like a small molecule, like a chemical, like aspirin is like a chemical, right? And so like so I say 2 of the top 10 best-selling drugs all the time were biologics. And by 2016, 8 of the top 10 best-selling drugs are biologics. And so like these biologic drugs are incredibly powerful. But the problem is they're incredibly expensive to make, and the proteins are unstable, and so they have to be kept cold chain, and they have to be injected, and all these things, so they can only be used for like very serious diseases. But that being said, I mean, they functionally could be used for anything if somebody found a way to deliver them more efficiently. And so I have an idea, or I have a way to solve this problem. I'll take a safe, edible probiotic bacteria you already every day, which these bacteria are capable of making. They make thousands of enzymes, thousands of different types of enzymes, and we can engineer it to make one additional enzyme, and therefore deliver you essentially a biologic drug factory directly into your body. And so and by doing so, we can take the cost of several $1,000s a dose down to literally pennies a dose, and then now we can apply it to like much more common everyday problems because people could now afford it. And so this is a way we can like bring access to this very powerful, basically like pharma level efficacy to consumer level products. So that was the original pitch. And then I would go into like, constitutive and robust expression through a protein, a promoter system, and all that kind of stuff. And
very science heavy.
Right, and a lot of eyes would gloss over, and there was like a little bit of interest in sort of this idea around like kind of like a new way to deliver biologic drugs, but didn't really connect it to consumer products well. And so yeah, it was sort of I learned a lot from a lot of.
What's your pitch now?
Well, the pitch now is like we're making the best possible products on the market using cutting-edge biotechnology to solve problems of everyday health in ways that nobody could do before. And we can patent them, and we own them, and we have complete differentiation from everybody else in the market. So that's a better resonant thing, right? We're making better products that we can patent and own, right? And then people are like, that sounds good. I want to know more about that.
Yeah, so basically, well, still the concept is the same, using bacteria as enzyme plants, like producing engines.
Exactly. It's I mean, nothing about the products has changed in the last 9 years. It's only the way I tell it, the story, that's changed. Yeah.
What's the worst skepticism you heard from people?
I mean, I heard some funny stuff that I still to this day. I wish I could call them up and be like, I have more than one. It just shows you how uncoupled VCs are from reality and from actual people.
Examples.
I had more than one VC say to me, I mean, do people even get hangovers? Is that a thing? Is this a problem that people have? I mean, they had no idea that this is 60% of Americans drink at least once a month, 3 or more drinks in a single sitting. And so it's this is something that people everybody deals with on a regular basis, so. That was kind of funny. And yeah, I mean, there's just heavy skepticism. There's also heavy skepticism in me as a scientist being, could I run a consumer, could I build a consumer company? You know, could we make a product that, like, sure, I could, like, they're like, I believe that you could potentially do the science, but like whether or not I understand it, but I don't believe that you could do all the things that make it, like, the ground is littered with good, with the corpses of dead companies that had good science that couldn't commercialize their science well. And I think that was a valid concern, and I understand why people worry about that. And, to be honest, I wasn't sure I could do it, but well, that's not true. I was always very confident I could do it, but I acknowledged that there was risk to that, Yeah.
So I'm curious, you started in 2016, right? And at that time you were on your own. You got your first funding, right? How much was it? I'm curious.
Yeah, the first was $20,000. So I applied to Y Combinator, and at that time in 2016, they were testing out this thing called a fellowship program, so they have their core program, which is what they're famous for. But at that time, they were trying to find ways to do a lower investment in earlier stage companies and maybe like spread out to more. They eventually ended up doing startup school, but before they did that, this thing called the fellowship. And so it was $20,000, 2 months, entirely virtual, and then there was like a virtual demo day at the end. And they pretty much, it was focused on companies that were kind of going 0 to 1, and it pretty much just kind of helped you with your pitch, and kind of like your business plan and kind of what your focus of your business, and kind of helped you focus things like that. And so it was actually incredibly like just serendipitous and kind of perfect. That's exactly where it was. I was literally just at the idea stage. I hadn't built anything in the lab, and I applied and I got into this fellowship program, and then they really helped me kind of like refine the pitch, like get away from sort of this. Although admittedly, my demo day pitch at the end of that was still very like protein drug factory focused, but I was a better job of connecting it to kind of like the final product. So $20,000 there, and then at the end of that 2 months, demo day, and then I was able to get $300,000 from 2 investors, one check for $250,000, another check for $50,000. And that's really, the $20,000 was essentially not enough to do really anything besides convince me to quit my job. And but then that $300,000 was enough for me to get some lab space and get started on building and kind of like starting to de-risk the technology and the path to market. The other thing that people are skeptical about was like, well, can you bring a genetically engineered probiotic to market? Is there a regulatory path for that? And are people going to want it? And so I was able to start kind of getting to work on de-risking those things.
Can you describe how your life looked like during your first year of your startup?
Yeah, honestly, in some ways it was my favorite year, that first year, because it was definitely like totally a grind. But I mean, I was working on something that was totally new, not just to the world, but to me, and it was entirely my passion, and I was just totally singularly focused. So I got a lab space in Berkeley. But I didn't have any place to live, at least for the first few months I was there. And I grew up in Sacramento, which is about an hour and a half away from Berkeley. And so my folks still live there, and I would stay with them on the weekends, and then I would drive up to the lab, and then during the week I would just sleep in the lab, and I would just work. I would work. I was there. I'm starting on my startup. I didn't have any sort of like friends in the area really or anything. I had a few, but mostly just, so it was like, this is all I'm doing. And so I would go to the lab, and I just worked all day, and then I set up a sleeping bag under my lab bench on like some cardboard to make it softer, and then sleep there. And then I found that like the conference room of that was like this little conference room attached to the lab space, and I would just go in there, and I'd set an alarm for like 6:30 in the morning, so before anybody got in, and because I was carpeted, so it was like a little bit softer in there, and so I'd do that, and then I would go back, and I'd go back to my parents' house maybe once every 3 or 4 days, and like I got a gym membership, and so I would shower at the gym, yeah, and then I would go back to my parents' house once every 3 or 4 days to like maybe get the crick out of my back, and sleep in a bed one night, and then drive back to Berkeley. So for a year, that was really what my life was like. But it was just, like I say, it was just totally singularly focused. Like I knew what I wanted to build. I was doing exactly what I was trained to do. Like it was the science. It was just the working at the bench, and I was just totally, and I had other stuff. I was, obviously still trying to build out the story, and like I said, I was making phone calls to the FDA and calling up like potential customers, and all different kinds of things to try and build out the other parts. But really, like 90% of my focus was just on like the lab work, and so that was really fun, honestly. Like it was just like, hey, can you build it? And tons of headaches, tons of walls I ran into on the science, and not to, I don't want to look through it through rose-colored glasses. It was like a long slog in a lot of ways, but it was also like really rewarding, because when I eventually got on the other side and everything, so I really enjoyed that.
I admire, your mental toughness. I cannot imagine, like, how did you deal, I guess, like mentally, and like what did you do to support yourself through this whole?
I mean, that's honestly what you like I say, this is like, dead center kind of a core of what your training is like a grad student. It's like spend a lot of time, and in the early days of your PhD, your research goes slowly because as you say, you're doing one thing at a time. You do something, you let it sit, and then it doesn't work, and then you go back and do it again. By the end, you realize like how to stack out several different things to kind of overlap in time. So if something's not working out, you have 3 other things going on that could keep your progress moving, and so there's a lot of like, I don't know, you kind of once the machine starts moving and you got a lot of momentum, it feels good, like the progress feels good. So I think in terms of taking care of myself, I made sure that I was enjoying it. So that in and of itself meant that even though it was hard work, it was rewarding work. But also always made sure to invest in my health. Right, I was building this product for people to have access to products that could help them in their daily lives invest in their health. And so it's important, it's an important part of my life is like investing in health. So always made sure I made time for exercise. Like my lab ended up being, just a few blocks away from a rock climbing gym. So I got really into rock climbing for a little while, which is a fun way to like exercise. And yeah, those are the big things. When you're working like that too, it's actually really easy to build a lot of good structure in your life, like with my diet and so my life wasn't complicated, which meant that I could really be really good about diet and exercise and sleep and things like that. So
yeah, so from what I'm hearing, you kind of like built a whole structure of your life and made sure you had balance as well, like also exercising regularly, have like a healthy diet, and like really manage and schedule your life. Are you a work hard, play hard person?
I would say I probably, at one time in my life, yes. By the time I started my company, not anymore. Okay. By that point, I was more of a balanced person than a work hard, play hard person. And yeah, I had the luxury of doing that. Not everybody does, right? Like I didn't have a wife and kids, and so I didn't have like other demands on my time. I was able to be just like, as I say, like really singularly focused and really kind of like in control of my day. And so even though I was working, many 12+ hour days, like as I say, the work itself was enjoying and rewarding, so it wasn't grinding me down. And the rest of my time was also in my control. So it wasn't like neglecting my family in order to do that, where I think, some founders do have to balance those things. And there's totally, my life's more complicated now than it was then, and I do have to balance other things now. And so, and it's all possible. But at that time when I was so focused on grinding out as much as I could with that $300,000 and getting as much out of that as I could, because every day I was paying rent on that lab was bleeding my very small budget away, and so that was important. But I was fortunate in that I had the luxury of being able to really just dive into that.
And then from what I know, a year later, when you kind of like got your first product or something, you met your co-founder,
right,
Steven, right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it took me about almost exactly a year to the day from when I started the company to when I had the first prototype in hand, which is the same bacteria that's in our product today. So I tested it on myself and wrote a whole protocol for what would make me feel terrible the next day, and then took the product before and woke up the next day and felt better than expected, and was very happy about that. Didn't consider that proof, but consider that at least consistent with the hypothesis that I was on the right track, right? But then continued testing. But then, yeah, at some point I was like pretty convinced that I think I have a product here that is ready to go, or I shouldn't say ready to go, but that I have a core ingredient of a product that, so then I was like, yeah, I need to turn this science experiment into a business. And that was not something that I was trained to do. So I started looking for a co-founder, somebody who could help me kind of build the company and build the business around kind of the product. And so I was introduced to my co-founder through, because I had done the Y Combinator accelerator, the fellowship program. I had access to that internal forum and network, and so somebody on that forum talked about my co-founder Steven and said that he was looking to potentially join a startup in the food or ag space, and I said I'm kind of in the food space, and so reached out and sort of convinced him. I met him on the phone, and immediately he sort of like exuded competence and integrity. Just if you meet Steven, you'll know what I mean. He's just the one who you immediately trust, and you're like, yes, great. And so he was getting his JD MBA, and I was like, great, 2 degrees for the price of 1, like super smart guy, and like very capable, and like I say, very clearly was very honest and had a lot of integrity. And so I was like, after it took me 5 minutes to decide that he's the person I wanted.
5 minutes?
Yeah, I was sure.
Love at first sight.
It was for me, not for him. And so I spent the next, because he gets on a call, he's like, look, I'm not really looking to join a startup of one with like no traction or anything. And so I had to sort of like, but I spent the next several months sort of like convincing him that this was a cool opportunity and that we could build something together. And so he eventually got on board. And the kind of the way I finally convinced him was he was just finishing up with grad school when we first were introduced. And so I said, when he got done, I said, hey, come out and just work with me for a week and just sort of like get a feel for what I'm doing, and we can get to know each other better and something. He said, okay. So I flew him out, worked for a week together, painted the whole picture of kind of like what I thought the business could be and what we could build, like this whole new category of engineered probiotics, and like we would be the world's first ever genetically engineered probiotics to go to market, and like there'd be all these things with like supply chain and productization and all these things that we could do. And I think that got him excited about the opportunity, but ultimately you had to buy into the product too, right? And so of course in the last night I had to take him out and make sure he also tried the product, and so we had like a very fun night together that started with the prototype. And the next morning he was supposed to go to Beta Breakers, which is this big race. For those who don't know, it's like this race where there's a lot of alcohol and it's kind of an all-day thing, and he was supposed to meet his friends at 7:30 in the morning, and he was able to do that. And in fact, he actually met his now wife that morning. So had the product not worked, he never would have met his wife. So I feel like, but anyway, he didn't know that at the time. But
wow.
He was impressed with the product, and I think with the opportunity, and so he joined me. Yeah.
He owes his love life to the product, to the Zbiotic.
Totally.
Wow.
It was a lot like dating, honestly. It's funny, I definitely was courting him hard, right? And then he joins, but then I had to win his parents over. He invited me that summer to his parents' house for they have a big 4th of July thing, and so he invited me, and we went, and his mom was her son had just gotten this really valuable degrees, and and now he's joining this one-person startup that's making this product for drinking. You're what is this? So I had to convince her that I wasn't some sketchy person, and that we were doing big things, and that this was an exciting opportunity. But then she also got on board and was excited, and his parents now have been super great, and been rooting for us and always supporting us in everything. Has been awesome. Yeah.
Wow, that's a fantastic story. It definitely sounds like sort of dating situation.
Oh yeah, totally. It totally is. I mean, Steven is my life partner, a whole, in a non-romantic way. It's very important person, and it's funny how that is. I think with the startup, I mean, they all a year or two later, we ended up doing the core YC program. So we reapplied, now that we had made more progress, and we go and they obviously there's a lot of things that they help you with, but one of the big things they focus on all the time is just founder relations. Apparently this is a huge challenge. Is you go into business with your friend or your whatever, the person you went to school with or something like that, and you like them, but then when you're having to make all these decisions and and the going gets tough, money, then things start to really fall apart, and you can really destroy a company if you don't see eye to eye. And so actually being able to kind of build a relationship de novo with Steven from the beginning was actually an advantage in some ways, because we didn't have any prior dynamic or relationship, and it was just really like, look, we both want the same thing. We want this company to be super successful, and like, you know, we were able to kind of establish like, how are we going to disagree? Like, how are we going to have conversations when we're not on the same page? Like, how are we going to escalate things? You know, and so we were able to just establish all that stuff super transparently, and now it's an incredibly functional, like, one of the healthiest relationships I have. You know, it's pretty awesome. Yeah.
It feels like also like from the interviews I heard that you did. So from what I understand, you kind of like established early on the dynamics. You kind of like went sort of through a therapy, like couples therapy, like early on.
Yeah.
To establish like the protocol, sort of like of how you interact, your leadership style.
We did. Yeah, and I think that as sort of like indicative of a lot of the things that we do was we weren't having problems, but we anticipated that we could, or that we would potentially, you know? And so it was sort of one of these things where like, not to say, you know, we certainly had our disagreements and stuff, but then we were like, hey, we should just, like, we keep hearing from YC that like founder relations don't work, like, let's invest in this now, you know? And so we did basically what amounts to like couples therapy for founders, and like exactly developed like communication tools and like, and you know, just sort of like strategies for empathizing with each other and things like that. And it was great. I mean, like those were the things that really, they opened up really, I mean, ultimately at the end of the day, all it is just, as with any relationship, it's just open, transparent, and honest communication. And like, how can you facilitate that as much as possible?
Can you give me maybe, like, if you can think of an example of where you had like a friction, and then maybe even a funny thing that like you managed to resolve, and then like you learned something from that?
Yeah, it's hard to think of one example because they happen all the time. Yeah, like, you know, Steve and I, while we have a very functional relationship, like you know, we definitely have different opinions all the time. I mean, I can't, I can sort of, you know, I can't think of any specifics per se, but like, I mean, yeah, we would disagree on like the color of something, or like, yeah, this like the first of many good decisions. Actually, I think we both really like that one. But like, you know, like everything, like little taglines, I mean, like all the time we disagree on stuff. And I think one of the best ways that we have, like one of the best tools we have, because, you know, when it's like my opinion versus yours, then like who's the tiebreaker? You know, like one person has to win and one person has to lose. And so I think one of the best tools we learned is to like not make it me versus you, right? And like us like flexing on each other on who's right and who's wrong, and like get outside empirical data to tip the scales in favor of one opinion. You're never gonna totally de-risk a decision, right? The more important it is, the more risky it is, and the more you're not gonna know for certain. But like the more you can say, okay, look, let's go out and let's ask like, you know, 100 people in a survey, or go out and like ask like 4 other people in the office, like, you know, whatever, depending on the question and the issue, and then like based on what they say, we'll both agree that whatever kind of like, you know, direction that's pointing us in, that's the way we'll go. And so getting outside data and getting outside information is the best way to like, I think, because otherwise you're just arguing about opinions, and like somebody has to win and lose. So, you know, we've learned a lot, and we've gotten really good about that. Like, okay, when we start getting into those arguments, like, okay, like let's just find out, let's get some more data on this.
Yeah. So, yeah. Well, with the team, it sounds like who do you like more, mommy or daddy?
Oh, totally. And we have to be careful about that. It's like, that. But I think people know. They like mom and dad get in fights in meetings all the time, you know, and then it's sort of like is it okay? Are they gonna get divorced? And no, we're fine. We're okay. So yeah.
Oh, this is so funny. Yeah. Okay, I'm curious about like the early days. I know that you were, you know, like having these test bottles. You were in the lab producing them nonstop.
Yeah.
Those samples, and then you would go like and try to distribute them and have people try them.
Yes.
Like, can you tell me more about that period of time? And also, like, it was, from what I understand, was not quite FDA approved at the time.
Right. Well, so minor kind of like linguistic point.
Okay.
FDA approval is for drugs, and so we're not.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not a supplement does not have to be FDA approved.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So we're a food, and so we are regulated by the FDA, and they have requirements and things like that. But they do not approve them technically. So, but no, you're right that we weren't on the market yet, and so we hadn't done like food grade manufacturing and those sorts of things. So we were just beta testing at that time, and I mean, like we knew that we had a great product, but we also knew from very early on, just even dealing with the people who knew and trusted us the most, that there was so much skepticism about this category that people were very resistant to the product, whether or not they actually needed it. There were like two big hills that we had to get over with everybody, and we still see this all the time. And it was that basically the first thing was people would say, that won't work, right? Like, so there's skepticism, like, that the category is fake, this doesn't work, like that's not a problem, you can't solve this problem. And then, okay, we talk, I talk to them, say for like 15 minutes, explain the science, and okay, I believe you, this could work. But the second hill then was I don't need it. And what we saw was that in America, it's not true in other countries, necessarily in all the countries, but in the US, in our culture, alcohol is sort of seen as like shameful almost, like drinking and like if you wake up the next day and you don't feel your best, it's evidence that you were irresponsible. And so like getting somebody to take a product that's meant to prevent sort of like the next day effects of drinking was forcing people, at least the perception was that they saw, was that you're forcing me to admit that I'm about to do something that's bad for me. And so so rather than take something that even if that was true, they by not taking it, they don't have to admit it to themselves, right? Like, I don't need it. We literally have conversations with people at a bar where we'll be handing them a product and say like, hey, this is a free sample for free. You don't have to pay us anything. And like in a worst case scenario, you will feel exactly the same tomorrow if you hadn't taken the product. And like if it even works a little bit, you'll feel a little bit better. And it's like people would be like, no, I don't need it. And you'd be like, well, like how many drinks does it normally take for you to feel bad the next day? And people, like somebody say like 5. And you'd be like, okay, well, what drink is that in your hand right now? And they'd be like, oh, it's my 3rd drink. And I'd be like, are you going to drink anymore? Like, yeah, I'm going to, but you have one more here, and then we're going to 2 other bars. And so like, you're definitely going to be drinking more than 5 drinks. And like, yeah, but I don't need it. Like people were so adamant. And so all of that, so basically for 2 years, Steven and I would like make samples, and I would make samples in the lab, and then Steven and I would go out to like, we would invite to like events, like, company like happy hours or company like holiday parties, or like like some meetup group would plan like a bar crawl or like a run club or something like that. And, like all these people would be doing these things, and we would show up and we'd set up a table, like and provide samples, and we would have like literally we calculated by the end we'd handed out 10,000 samples between the two of us, and we'd had like thousands of conversations with people, and basically we got better and better at like hearing all the objections and the psychology that was like wrapped up in this product category, and it was like actually in a lot of ways like really comforting. It's like, why had this category never succeeded before? And I mean, like, obviously first and foremost is because none of the products worked, but the truth is that there's a lot of categories where the products don't work, but they still manage to sell their snake oil all the time, right? Like and so why was this category special? That it was like kind of like even more snake oil resistant than other things. And so learning kind of like what people's objections were to the product. And so we knew we had a product that worked. And so we on the other side of the, we've been doing a lot of controlled testing and things to like convince ourselves that we had a product that was actually creating a benefit. But there was all this resistance to people. And so all those conversations were about like learning what those objections were and learning the best things we could say to get people over the hump. And so our initial brand was totally built based on those observations and those messages and like how people identified them, how they saw this product as some sort of reflection of their identity. And so like that's like when we launched the product, it was like it was all about kind of like special occasions and like things that were like this is not who you are. You're not somebody who like has a drinking problem. That's what everybody felt like. People to this day, they still say like, oh man, I'm one of your best customers. I buy the product all the time. But I mean, I don't know what that says about me. I don't know, that means I drink a lot. I'm like, I invented the product. You don't have to apologize to me for the fact that you use this product. Like I get it. Like I use it all the time too. It's because like drinking can be like is a very normal part of our social interactions, and it can be done responsibly, and it doesn't say anything about you necessarily, that like as long as you're drinking responsibly, but people have this like, it's very built in. So our brand was really meant to really focus on like helping people identify as a type of person who would like this product, you know?
Yeah. One weirdest story of you trying to convince somebody to try Zbiotics? The weirdest or the funniest?
Yeah, weird or funny? Oh, man. Good question. We had a lot of people who would ask us like kind of funny questions about like
give me examples.
Yeah, exactly. Unnecessary ways to like make the product easier to use or better to use in some way. Like they were solving a problem that didn't exist, right? Like this, you know, the product's this little liquid shot that you just drink. It takes half a second. It hardly tastes like anything, right? Like it doesn't need to be like, you know, it's not a big friction point, right? But people would be like, oh, well, you know, the ones that are obvious, like, oh, well, can I mix it in a drink? It's like, you could, but why do that? Just drink it. Like, it'll take 2 seconds, you know? And then they're like, you know, but then people will come up with like these sort of like ridiculous solutions around like, you know, like, oh, could you put it as an IV? And it's like, no, do not put bacteria into your bloodstream. And like, you know, like just like all these like kind of like ridiculous, like they'd start, it's funny, like you talk to people and they'd be so skeptical, but then once you got them over the humps and then now they're excited. Now they put on their like, you know, their startup hat, like they're, you know, an expert product designer, an expert marketer, and they're telling you like, you know where you need to have this, or you know how it should be. And like, oh, okay, good idea. Let me write that down, you know? So yeah, there was a lot of that. And so this is post-launch. We got a customer service inbound one time. Somebody asking if, since bacteria are most active in the gut, could I take this as a suppository? Like, could I do an enema to put it in directly at the source in the colon? And we said, I mean, don't do that. Like, just drink the bottle, man. This is not a problem that needs to be solved. Like, just drink the bottle. So we got some stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, this is funny, actually. Yeah. It's a suppository. Can I ask you? I'm really curious to learn a little bit about your upbringing. What formed you as a scientist? I guess, like, how did you fall in love with the bacteria? Yeah,
that's a good question.
Love story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I feel like I get to talk again about another important relationship in my life.
Exactly.
I always, like, as a kid, like, I really loved science, but I was interested in a lot. I was just curious. I was interested in a lot of things, and I was even in college. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had a lot of like interests, and I wasn't really sure where I was going to be. And so when I majored, I took a lot of science classes. I really like science, but I also took a lot of other classes. And so one of the other things I was really passionate about was classical history. I just thought it was like in classical art and archaeology. I like loved that, and I actually ended up double majoring in classics as well. I went on an archaeological dig in the one summer in college, and I think that like the through thread through all of that was I like to discover. I like to find like the truth, and so with history, you kind of dig through and find out what happened, right? And then with science, you're kind of like digging through to find out what is or what will be, you know? And
I see the connection. Right. You also can probably do some archaeological research and then find some bacteria.
Definitely, really, and there actually is a lot of cool microbial archaeology that like where people like literally find like, you know, especially the Romans had like public toilets and things, and so they can look through like old fecal material and see like what the microbiomes of ancient people were, the foods they ate. So super interesting to me. But you know, I didn't know about that time. But I think ultimately, I think one of the reasons why I was attracted to science, in addition to like the intrinsic passion, was, you know, sort of formative upbringing type things. I was the youngest of 3 brothers, and so I have 2 older brothers, and they're both very smart and very accomplished, and so like I lived my whole life trying to not be in their shadow, you know, and so trying to like define myself as something unique. You know, most of my family are lawyers or teachers, very much on like kind of like the more kind of liberal arts side of the spectrum. And so science, I think, in addition to being something I really enjoyed, it was also something that could be unique about me relative to my family. And so I think that was one of the reasons why I was sort of like pulled into it, was I liked that it sort of like made me different from my brothers, because neither of them are scientists. And so after college, I still didn't know what I wanted to do. Science was a possibility, but I was also interested in a lot of different things, and I worked at a ton of different jobs just trying to find things out, because I also like manual labor. I like working with my hands and things, and so I worked as a bartender for a while. I worked in construction for a while. And then I was like, I wanted to see if science was like, the thing was that there were no scientists in my family, so I didn't really know what a career as a scientist looked like. I didn't really have any model for that, and I didn't really understand what scientists did as a job. And so I just started applying for random science jobs to see what like a science job would be like. And so I literally went on, this was like, I think 2006, I went on like Craigslist, and there were some job postings, some science job postings. I was on Craigslist at the time. Interestingly, coincidentally, it was at a lab in the city of Berkeley. It actually ended up being only about a block from the lab I ended up starting Zbiotics in. But I got a job at this chemistry lab in Berkeley, worked there for a year. I really enjoyed it. That job and that path specifically wasn't for me, but it was like, okay, like I think science could be, I get it more now. And so then I went and I got a job that was in chemistry, and I knew I was more interested in biology. And so I went and got a job at a lab at UC Davis studying HIV. And I was like, had always been very interested in HIV, because kind of growing up in the 80s and 90s, we were sort of like, it was like this big problem, and nobody really understood it, and it was like the biggest challenge in infectious disease. And so thinking about like a scientist, like I always, my whole life, I think one of the other things is like I like to discover, but I also like to solve. I like problem solving and like puzzles and things, and so infectious disease felt like a really like fascinating and rewarding kind of like challenge or puzzle to solve, and HIV felt like the most challenging and fascinating of those, for at least for the sort of like an uneducated, or unaware of kind of like all the opportunities within biology. That was what sort of like drew me. And so did the HIV lab research. I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. And so then I was like, okay, well, if I want to do a career in this, I need to go get a PhD. And so I applied to PhD programs, and in my head, I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to study HIV. Or alternatively, maybe another virus, but like definitely viruses. And then I get into my PhD program at Michigan, and I go, and I specifically chose the places I wanted to apply to were all places that had virologists that I was excited about working with, and things like that. And so I get to Michigan, and the virologist that I was really, she was studying HIV and studying the element of HIV that I was most interested in. She had initially accepted me to kind of do a rotation in her lab, and then at the last minute, like she said, actually, you can't rotate in the lab until next semester. And so then I had like 3 days to find another lab, and so I just started looking around for like any lab that had an opening, and I found this lab. And so I went to my advisor, my advisor, and I was like, hey, who should I talk to? And she was like, I think these people have open spaces, and so I picked this woman, Michelle Swanson. She was studying this bacteria, not a virus, called Legionella pneumophila, a bacteria I'd never even heard of. And I was like, and so I went to her and I said, look, like I really want to stay HIV, but I couldn't do the rotation that I wanted. And so I thought it'd be fun to just do like one semester in a bacteriology lab just to see what bacteria are like. Is that cool? And she's like, yeah, that's actually no problem. Like, I'm not really looking to take students anyway. And so I joined the lab, and like a week in, I was like, this is it. I love it. Like I was like sold. So it turns out what really I learned later, I came to appreciate later, is that like I think if you're a passionate, interested scientist, you can get excited about anything. But I fell in love with bacteria. I was like, wow, I never appreciated how exciting and interesting and capable they are, and like they're these little single cells that have like hundreds or thousands of different sensors that like sense their environment and change, like, and they just do all these, and they're capable of doing all these, every biological function on the planet, right? And so anyway, I won't nerd out too hard, but I fell in love with bacteria. I loved it. And so I ended up staying in her lab. I went back and did my rotation in the HIV lab, and then came back and worked with Michelle, studying this bacteria, Legionella. And then and so I throughout my PhD, I just got, it was focused on understanding how bacteria turn on and off different functions, basically like based on different signals from their environment. And so I got really good at bacterial gene regulation, and that was kind of like what my expertise was in. And all the while, it was sort of the idea I didn't know I was going to start a company, but like this idea around engineered probiotics was kicking around in my head as like, it wasn't what I was studying in my PhD, but it was related. It was related to kind of like using bacteria or engineering them in some way to like leverage their ability to turn things on and off. So that was kind of, I don't know, that's kind of how I fell in love with bacteria, and how I got there. It was not what I was planning to do. And I certainly wasn't planning to start a company, but that's kind of where I got
Lucky coincidence.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who are PhD students, and some of them like entertain the idea of starting a business. But what would be your advice as like previous PhD student, like to transition from more of academia, so you know how it's different, right?
Yes.
And then into the business world.
Yeah, I think that something I said earlier, I think is like one of the most important things to keep in mind is that like cool science or good science doesn't necessarily mean commercializable science. Like those are, they are overlapping, like, but they are not the same thing. And so it's really important to think about like, just because something is like even revolutionary or groundbreaking doesn't necessarily mean that it's the kind of thing that is good for commercialization, or at least maybe not right now. So I think that's an important part. And then in terms of the idea of like starting a company, everybody's path is different. But for me, what I found was that like, and at least what I've seen from others as well, is that like if your goal is to like start a company just because that's like what you want to do, I think that can be frustrating. But if your goal is that you're really passionate about this idea, and the idea is what's driving you, and it turns out that the best way to pursue this idea is to start a company around it, then I think that, because starting a company is hard, like a million rejections, a million no's, a million rough days, and the only way I was able to get through that and stay with this is because I was so passionate about the idea of of the thing I was trying to build, these engineered probiotics. And so it was, for me, it was an inevitability. This was going to happen with or without me, and I wanted to be the one to do it. And so therefore, when things didn't go well, I was like, okay, well, I know there's a way to make it get done. And so like, that's what pushed me through. And so I think if you're thinking about starting a company because the idea of being a founder sounds like something that's fun or whatever, I think you'll probably get disillusioned on that pretty quick. I think you have to be really passionate about the idea for the business itself is what it has to be. For me, I think that's the best way to make it through kind of like the difficulties of being a startup founder.
You don't match with any investor. You're also kind of picky.
Well, we are and we are. I wouldn't say that we're picky per se. It's more that our business is sort of doesn't fit neatly into most VCs boxes. So like there's sort of like this biotech investor who appreciates the science of what we're doing, but like their business, their evaluation of like the potential of the business is very much more like drug driven, right? Or kind of these different like defined pathways. And so like when we go talk to a biotech investor, they'd be like, okay, well, where are, how many research grants do you have, and like, where are your clinical trials and what are your plans for that? And we're like, well, no, we don't have to do those things. Like that's not how our business is set up. We're not going to be raising money for those things. We're raising less money, and our goal is to build products that we can validate, but then we bring to market as consumer products. And they're kind of like, we don't know what to do with that. We don't understand the consumer space. And so then we go to talk to CPG investors, and they were like, just totally discounted. They don't understand. They don't care about the science. And they're like, yeah, we've heard it 100 times. Your product's better. But like, how many customers you have, and like, what's your traction, and like, who on your team is like, can get Kim Kardashian on the phone and like endorse your brand. It's like, it's all about like, because they're not used to dealing with people who have products that are actually differentiated. So for them, like CPG is all about like building a brand and like racing all the other brands that are exactly like you, and so like this idea of like, we have an effective ingredient that is patented that nobody else can use, and that actually works, and like we don't have to race, and like, yes, building a brand is incredibly important, but the fact is that we can take time to iterate on that, and like our goal is not to give a quarter of our company to like some influencer to like make. And so the CPG playbook, long story short, is also different than what we had. And so we were kind of in the middle. And so the problem was, so we couldn't, all the big names and stuff just weren't all that interested. because we didn't fit into the mold of what they wanted. And so we had to find the weird investor, the one that was like willing to kind of like see that we were going to go in a new direction, and we were kind of like straddling kind of like two spaces with like, we're very much a biotech company, but we're also very much like a CPG company, and the growth was going to be slower than your typical CPG, but the margins and the protection were going to be so much better. And so that was like, you know, the story we had to tell, and it took a lot of like pulling to get like some investors that would agree to that vision, and we were very upfront with investors as well. That the other thing that I think was different than maybe the more typical startup was that Steven and I have always been committed to like wanting to build a long-lasting company, and so our goal was, so we tell investors like, look, we're not looking for a quick exit. And they're like, what's your exit strategy? And we're like, you know, we don't really have one. Like, you know, basically our strategy is to build a really successful business, and if along the way an exit comes up, then great, and we'll take it. You know, as long as it makes sense. But really, right now we're trying. So obviously, a lot of investors are looking to turn their portfolio every 3 years. So we're not super excited about like the 10 to 15 year vision that we had. But there were the investors that were, and you know, and those are the ones we were looking for.
Yeah, what if you told them, well, we're building a multi-generational scientific dynasty,
yeah, right.
like with a range of different products that are based in GMO.
That's what we told them, and so we were just, I guess.
And they became white.
Yeah, well, they became in some cases they became uninterested. In most cases, honestly, but yeah, I mean, like I guess the hot take here is that we were just honest with them about like neither Steven nor I was interested in building a business that we could flip in 2 or 3 years. It just wasn't, and like I get there's so much value in that, and there's a lot of great companies that are built that way. It just wasn't what we were interested in doing, and so we were trying, you know, and it's easy enough to say in an investor meeting that that's what we're doing, and you know, when it doesn't happen, whatever, you know, but like that just what, like we were just like, we wanted investors that were on board with what we were trying to build, so we were really just kind of like honest and transparent, and that just wasn't like in the model for some, but there are plenty of funds where it was too, so a lot of ways it sort of helped us kind of like narrow in on the ones that were like aligned with our vision, and that's been great because now when we have these meetings, like obviously our investors are always pushing us, you know, to grow faster, grow more, whatever, you know, all the things they, you know, they want to see success, but we're very much aligned on like timelines and things like that, and so there's not like this pressure of like, you know, like or misalignment on kind of like where things need to be.
I'm curious what the first investor courtship looked like.
Yeah, well, I mean, like the first. Like that, you know, back when I was trying to get that first, like, you know, $300,000 checks in the early pitches, I mean, like my first 10 were so bad. I mean, they were disasters, you know, like just eyes glossed over, don't understand. There's no way this guy's ever going to be able to do this thing he's saying, like just totally ridiculous. But, you know, I got those reps in and I got the feedback and I saw where I lost them. I saw the questions people had. And I would always ask at the end, like, they'd say like, oh, you know, we'll be in touch, and I'd be like, you know, okay, great, like, you know, honestly, like, how do you think I'm doing right now? And a lot of times they would, you know, because they knew I was new, they would answer, and they'd be like, look, honestly, this is probably not a very refined pitch, or, you know, and they give me feedback, and then I would reach out, or if they send me an email Tuesday and say, yeah, we're gonna pass, they'd be like, hey, if you really get on a call with me for 5 minutes and just give me like just honest feedback on like what I could do better, because I want to get this done, and I get that I didn't speak to you, you know, and so I would get that, and so pitches 1 to 10 were terrible, and then 10 to 20 were better, and then the last 5 got pretty good. I got to the point where they were all interested, or, you know, at least interested enough, you know, like to actually give me some thought, and then, you know, and that was kind of how I was lucky that the person I spoke to, who actually in investing was one of the last ones I spoke to. I think if I talked to him sooner, I would have not ever closed that one. So that was good. But then, you know, and then the next time we went around, same thing. Like, you take all those lessons, but you're in a new space, you're at a new stage of the company, right, when you're raising again. And so, like, all the things you learned from the last one are only partially applicable. And so, more and more now, we just build in, like, reps. Like, I start to, our early investor meetings now, when we are planning on a new round, are ones we know we're never going to close. So we can get out the bad reps, basically, like, get the feedback in, and then, like, refine the pitch so that when we go to the ones we're really most excited about, we're ready, you know?
I know that you're a rugby player. Do you think that also kind of informed your strategy, or like how you approach fundraising as well?
The athlete part of me is probably more influenced my sort of like my day-to-day work ethic, you know, like, you know, make sure you're training with purpose, and like, you know, make sure you have a goal in mind. And so that helps with kind of the day-to-day. 'Cause that's the other thing is like, we talked about this a little bit earlier, but like, how do you not get ground down or burned out? Because there's always more work to do, always, and the weight of that can kill you eventually, metaphorically or literally in some cases. So the idea of sustainability as you pursue those things, I think that was a lesson I had to learn as an athlete as well. That there's only so hard you can push before you're doing damage, and so you have to kind of find a sustainable way to balance what you do every day. And so that, I think, that mentality of very hard work ethic and goal-oriented work, but that's sustainable is in terms of pitching, yeah, probably practice and repetition make perfect and things like that for sure, yeah.
0 to I talk to my cells. How weird were you as a kid?
As a kid? Oh man, I was weird, yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I was totally dorky on the 0 to I talk to my cells, I was pretty close to I talk to my cells. Do
you talk to your the bacteria in the lab?
All the time, yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
Oh, I mean, usually narrating, what I'm doing, possibly giving them a call and response where I say something, they respond back, yeah, it's a good idea, let's do it. So yeah, a lot of that. I used to, as a kid, a good example of this was I used to dress up like a mad scientist for Halloween and stuff. I was these are I was a weird kid, for sure. So.
You were already seeing the future.
Yeah, well, I didn't know at the time that was my actual future. Yeah, but.
Okay, what would be your go-to Halloween costume? To represent you now.
Today?
Yes, today.
To represent me?
Yeah.
I mean, if I could pull it off, right? If I was a really good costume person, I could make the whole foam thing. I would love to dress up like a bacteria. That would be tight.
Yeah, bacteria guy. Oh, yeah. Wow.
Just the whole and totally biologically accurate too. Have some fimbriae, have a flagellum, all the good stuff. So yeah.
That would be cool. Specifically that is Zbiotic
totally
strand.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For beta breakers.
I could get a whole bunch of us. Yeah. It'd be good.
I'm down to participate.
Yeah. Well, like I say, I mean, what I'm envisioning is not, I lack the creative skills to build this, but yeah.
I have friends. I can connect you.
Okay, amazing, cool.
What would be your advice for founders about romantic and dating situation? How to balance, crazy busy lifestyle with romance. Also, I feel in the Bay Area it's kind of weird. Maybe it's because I'm European.
No, I think everybody agrees with you on that. I think, the most important thing is, it's exactly the same as we were talking about with investors, being transparent and setting expectations correctly. And
do the reps.
What's that? Yeah, well, do the reps.
Ask for feedback.
Yes, all those things are good too. But no, I meant more the idea of just if you're dating to, be transparent about, and whatever is true for you, how much you work every day, and how much time you have for the relationship, and just setting those expectations up front, so that there's not a misalignment, because, and where your priorities are, this is a really important thing to me, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time doing this right now, and, we're fundraising in the next year, and so realistically, it's going to be a lot of long hours or whatever, and I think that's important. Or if you are a little bit further along and you have a clear sort of regimen about that, I think also just being honest about that, be look, I'm really inaccessible from 9 to 6 every day, but after that, I'm I'm good to go or something,
What about the stereotype that founders are emotionally unavailable? Do you agree with that or not?
No, I think that if they are, then they're probably bad founders. I don't know. I guess, look, I shouldn't say that. There's 100 recipes for a good cake, right? But I guess I don't think that is necessary as a founder, and I think that there's a lot of strengths. I think that you have to overcome a lot of challenges to be an emotionally unavailable person as a founder. Being a founder isn't just about it is first and foremost about convincing investors, right? And that requires empathy, and and being a good salesperson means understanding people, and fundamentally what you are as a founder is a salesperson. And then, but it's not just about that, right? You're also building a company. You have all these employees, and you have to motivate and inspire them and communicate what you're trying to accomplish to them and have them want to work for you. And so I think if you're emotionally unavailable, then you're fighting with one arm tied down on your back. At least my style of leadership of my company is one where I try to be as available and honest and like emotionally vulnerable with my company all the time, and like let them know where I'm at, let them know when things aren't going well, like let them know things are going great, like whatever. And I think that like if you're sort of like trying to be this robotic person, then I don't know, harder to connect with people. So yeah. I think personal connection is like really important. At least that's my style, and like so that's personal connection with investors and our customers and our employees. And so you can do without, I guess, but I don't think you need to be.
Yeah, well, there's another stereotype that you have to be cutthroat to be really good in business. Yeah, so like you kind of answered the question.
Yeah, right. And I mean, look, I don't know if I'm really good at business, so maybe I'm not the right person to ask, but I hope that's not true. And I can say at least I've met a lot of good people that are very successful. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I believe that you don't have to be a total jerk.
Can you pitch GMO to me? I know that this is like quite, controversial topic. Many people are looking specifically for food with like non-GMO label, and especially like in Europe.
Right.
And I'm not sure, but like, do you have your product in Europe?
No, we don't have product in Europe right now. The product's only available in the U.S. Currently, and that's in part due to the fact that it's genetically engineered. But it's interesting. It's actually not as controversial as everybody thinks it is. So
not anymore?
No, or ever. In the U.S. So speaking in the U.S. specifically. One of the most. So I'll start by saying that. Very passionate about the idea that genetic engineering and GMOs can be, genetic engineering fundamentally is a technology, and it can be used to build products, and those products can be good or bad, safe or unsafe, and they can enable good business practices or bad business practices, but ultimately it's just a technology, right? Like in and of itself inherently is not good or bad. And so I'm passionate about the idea that we can use genetic engineering to build things that are good, that align with people's values, that like help humanity sustain itself on this planet, like in a way that is aligned with nature and the ecosystems that we hope to persist. So I think, and from the beginning, I've always built the company around this premise that we could do this conversation better. And so what happened was that basically some of the earliest applications of genetic engineering were like, and the ones that are really around the non-GMO movement are really centered around is really like Roundup Ready corn and soy, right? So these corn and soy plants, and there's others too, but like, and generally speaking, I mean, these are the most common corn and soy plants that have been engineered to be resistant to pesticides. And so that means that you can apply more pesticides to the land, and these crops are resistant, so they can resist and they can still grow, and you get less pest destruction of the plants, which means more yield per acre, which ostensibly in some ways is more sustainable, right? Like we're mowing down less forests to plant crops because we're getting more yield out of the land we already have. And there are obviously huge problems as well, right? That those pesticides are damaging to the environment. They wash into local water systems. Like they in and of themselves could be toxic, and so if people ingest them, they might not be good for them. So there's a very reasonable debate that is being had around that, right? But the problem is that the thing that's being debated is the increased use of pesticides, which was enabled by a product, the plant being genetically engineered. The genetic engineering itself is not what created the problem, right? But unfortunately, what started out as a very reasonable debate got sort of like conflated with the technology itself. And so this non-GMO movement was all around the idea that like all GMOs are bad, and that doesn't make sense, right? And most people don't have the time to dig in, and all the GMOs they ever encounter are these ones, so they're like, whatever, it's all the same thing, and then what happened was that a bunch of brands sort of saw this as an opportunity to differentiate themselves. Remember going back to the CPG, right, where like, how do I make my brand better than the other brand? It's like, oh, well, mine's non-GMO. It's like, even though none of their ingredients have a genetically engineered alternative, right? Like you could imagine, like for instance, there is no GMO wheat. Wheat has not been genetically engineered. And yet, you go to the grocery store and you see wheat flour that has a non-GMO label on it. It's like, all wheat is not GMO. Yeah, it's marketing, exactly. And like, you pay money for that label, and that's it's a business in its own right? And so then the problem with that is that sort of fans the flames of fear that like now a customer walks to the grocery store and they see the non-GMO butterfly everywhere, and they're like, oh, well, GMOs must be bad if all these brands are telling me that, and so that then sort of the tail starts to wag the dog and sort of create this narrative around genetic engineering. And so me as a scientist, I was like really upset about that, because the fact is that I knew about, people who were engineering microbes, for instance, to like fix carbon from the air, like greenhouse gases from the air, and turn that into like sustainable bioplastics that are biodegradable, like incredible things that are sustainable for the planet, right? And that's a GMO. And people didn't like, and the problem was that like, because of 20 years of this other narrative, like they were having to like hide that or build their business in a way where they could like, figure out a way to do it without genetic engineering, but like then it wasn't as good. And there's just all this, this negative backlash that was happening. And what I also discovered, so the thing was, look, I could go on Facebook and yell about this till I'm blue in the face and never convince anybody, right? But I thought like, if I could make a product that was like, that people wanted and provided a benefit that they wanted, because and say that benefit was there because of genetic engineering, then that could help maybe open up the conversation or elevate it beyond like, is there or isn't it, into something more rational nuance, which is what I think is where we should be with the conversation. I'm not here saying that all GMOs are good, but I'm also saying that like, they're also not all bad. That's ridiculous. Like it's just a technology. The analogy I often use there is like gun control, right? In this country, there's a very reasonable debate about whether guns are good or bad, like on the whole net, right? And I think that's a debate that is good to have and needs to have. Nobody who's anti-gun is anti-metallurgy, the technology used to make guns, right? Like, because we recognize that metallurgy can make a spoon, which is a very safe product, right? And in the same way, genetic engineering is a tool and a technology, right? And it can make things. And so maybe there's some genetic engineering, GMO guns out there, but there's also like a lot of GMO spoons out there as well. And I'm passionate about kind of like elevating that conversation and changing that. And so the thing that I found was, what I thought was really interesting was that like, that there's this belief that everybody is non-GMO because the brands are kind of telling you the story. But when in reality, when you look at like unbiased surveys where you ask people, most people actually don't know or care all that much about it. And so one of the most common things that we learned, so I did before we launched, because fundamentally this was like very foundational to our mission, which is around like elevating the conversation around GMOs. One of the things I found in early surveys we did where we talked to a lot of people was that the most common thing I heard was like, well, I would say like, are you anti-GMO? They'd be like, well, I don't care about it, but I think everybody else does, so you probably shouldn't talk about it. And that's what I heard from everybody. And I was like, when am I gonna talk to somebody who actually themselves, like everybody believes that everybody else cares. But the reality is like, actually, most of the data shows that only about 20% of people in the US are really strongly anti-GMO. And there's another 20% that are like, sort of like lukewarm, like conviction loosely held. And then there's 60% of people who don't have an opinion, don't care, or are pro-GMO. And so that's the majority of people, like 60%. And so, and really even with that 40% who are anti-GMO, it's very much tied to this this very small application of genetic engineering. And so first of all, we want to dispel the myth that everybody is anti-GMO, because all these brands make this ridiculous like assumption around that like because people choose a non-GMO product in one case, they'll reject all GMOs in every case no matter what, which is ridiculous, right? Like people buy soda even though they know it's bad for them, right? Like people will buy products even if they think that they're bad, if they have a benefit they want. Like that's like, we know that's basic human like psychology, right? And so, like I say, like GMOs aren't even bad, but like the point is that if you give people a product that they want, has a benefit they want, they will purchase it. And so, our mission at Zbiotics is to build products that people want. Then we do that responsibly and transparently, and in so doing, we can elevate this conversation about good or bad, or is it or isn't it, into something more rational nuance, that a technology is a technology and it can make products, and are those products aligned? Do they give you things you want? Are they aligned with your values? Are they sustainable? Like if you can do all those things, and you absolutely can with genetic engineering, then I think that's really important. One of my favorite stories about this was we were doing this we're doing a bunch of surveys and things like that, and then we actually set a focus group. So we brought in 6 people who had identified in a survey we did that they were very strongly anti-GMO, and also consider themselves to be well educated on the topic. And so our goal in bringing them in was to see kind of like where they got their information, how they formed their opinions, and like how they educated themselves on this topic. And the goal wasn't to convert them or anything. It was really just to learn more about kind of that one. And so us and a couple other brands were participated in this, and or a couple other companies, I should say. And so spent an hour asking a bunch of questions and a ton of amazing insights. And it was really great. And then afterwards, it was like a little meet and greet. We had like some snacks and things out, and we were just chatting with them and stuff. And I was talking with one of the women who was on the panel, and she spent the last hour saying how she always buys non-GMO, and she cooks for a church, and she always makes those non-GMO ingredients because that's safer and healthier or whatever. Okay. So then she asked me, we're chatting, and she's like, well, what do you do? And so I tell her, and she goes, that's so cool. Can I try it? And I said, well, yeah, but like it's a GMO. And she's like, oh, that's okay. It was like instantaneous, right? Like immediately. And that was like the most validating moment for me, because I didn't try and convince her that it was safe or anything. I just told her, like, look, we have a probiotic bacteria that we've engineered to express an enzyme your liver uses to break down acetaldehyde so you get better the next day. And it's like, and she just immediately could tell that that's different than Roundup Ready corn, right? Like that, like, and like, so that like the anti-GMO movement was currently all focused on this one thing, but like we could elevate this conversation. People could be more nuanced, and I knew that was the case, but like hearing that from somebody was like so validating, and that's a conversation I've had over and over again, argument I've had over and over again with like everybody who's speculating on behalf of the public, right? Like so, like real retailers and investors and employees of Zbiotics, like in the early, like when we're recruiting and things like that, like people are constantly like, well, why do you shouldn't you hide the fact that you're GMO? Like, isn't that going to be better for business? I'm like, no, that is going to be way worse for business. Like, being transparent is the best thing we can do, and it's not going to hurt our business. In fact, it's going to be an asset.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You're so passionate. I'm really curious to learn, like building this startup, what did you learn about yourself that you didn't know before?
Some of the things I learned that I put a lot of pressure on myself, which I always kind of knew, but I think that it gets massively magnified, right, when you're relying on yourself for these things. And so perfectionism and the procrastination and all those sort of like bad habits I always knew I had, but when I only had to answer to myself, it was even worse. And just seeing how crippling that was to like, and how counterproductive that was, I think is maybe what I hadn't realized. I think I'd always sort of told myself this narrative that like my procrastination was just part of my my method, and like my perfectionism was an asset at the end of the day or whatever. But then when you see that like it actually kind of gets in the way of progress and productivity, that you have to sort of, I had to sort of like confront that this wasn't a good part of my personality. So I think that was a big one for me.
How did you deal with that?
I still am. It's really hard. But yeah, I mean, I think acknowledging it and like being honest with myself about like how it was impacting me and the stress it created and things like that. And yeah, I mean, like I think there's this desire to do everything and do it all well. And then at some point recognizing that that's a myth, that you'll never, your inbox, you'll never stop getting emails. You'll always be like, under a huge pile of emails. Your to-do list will never be empty. You'll never reach that moment where you're on top of everything. And so like being more forgiving of that inevitability actually results in getting, and accepting perfection's impossible actually results in, I think, more productivity and more like sustainable kind of like work, basically.
If this bacteria you engineered could talk about you, what would it say?
I would say, so what would it say? Bacteria would probably say that I'm a very passionate advocate for it, that I'm a champion for genetic engineering and all the good things it can do, and it would probably also say like, look, what you're doing isn't all that special. We've been doing it for 3 billion years. Like, we edit our own DNA all the time, and so like, big deal. Like, come talk to me in a couple billion years when you figured it all out.
Very funny. Some personal advice for me. So, for instance, I was trying to build, trying to experiment, with in my case, digital product. But what I discovered is, when I'm working on myself, I can, as you said about your case, I can go forever perfecting something, and working on some feature forever and forever.
Right.
Unless, I don't know, what I guess works for me is having a mentor or somebody I can be accountable with, or basically have some, I don't know, supervision in a sense, or building this kind of guilt or peer pressure or something. What did you use for to, I don't know, get yourself more into more productive?
Yeah. I think, I mean, fundamentally, whatever tools you find to sort of disrupt the narratives that are keeping you from being productive, or hold you accountable to the things that are that you've committed to. I mean, for me, having a co-founder, and in particular, Stephen is the most productive person on the planet, and so it was keep up, so it was helpful. I mean, having a co-founder, I think, is huge. Assuming you have a good relationship, good kind of with a healthy relationship with them is really, really, really helpful. And then, I think having somebody to talk to for me is more around at the end of the day, it all kind of results in just sort of anxiety and doubt and imposter syndrome. And so talking to somebody or some buddies who can help you kind of disrupt those narratives and recognize what really needs to be done, I think is helpful. So I've been in various sort of founder groups, and that's been a helpful thing, or getting, like you said, getting a mentor I can talk to you about. I've definitely had a call where I'm hey, am I the right person to be the CEO of this company? I don't know what I'm doing, and have them say, oh, do you like doing X, Y, and Z, and are you good at this and this? Then okay, then you're still in the right position to be this. So I think having conversations like that is really important. I'm
curious, what was the hardest maybe moment that you can share, that you went through as a founder?
It's hard to say a hardest moment. There's definitely been times
emotionally, I guess.
Yeah. There's definitely been times of high stress, or I don't think there was ever a single
maybe the one that you learned from the most, or that transformed you, or made you do a shift or a pivot or something like that.
COVID was pretty impactful. I guess that's sort of a go-to we all get now. But for us, so we launched in August of 2019 this product around social drinking, and in the early days, it was all about. As I was saying before, we had to disrupt this narrative of that you're being irresponsible, or that you don't identify as a drinker, and so therefore you don't want the product. And so our initial strategy we saw worked well was that we talked about special occasions, usually you don't drink very much, and you don't, but this is a wedding, or this is a vacation, and so you're going to be doing things that aren't your usual behavior, and so then this is the product that helps you make sure you make that Sunday brunch after the wedding, or you make day 2 of your vacation, and that was very much aligned for people, and it was a great way. And basically, what we did do is just get people over the hill the first time, and they try the product, and then they liked it, and then they could see okay, I see its value. It definitely helps me kind of every day with my next day is important no matter what it is, whether it's vacation or not. But sort of getting people. So we anchored on this weddings and travel, and then March 2020, whatever that is, 6 months after we launched, right? None of those things made any sense, right? Nobody's traveling, all the weddings were canceled, right? And it was gone. And so we were oh crap, what are we gonna do? And that was a tough time, I guess. And we also had one of our manufacturers pull out on us. They basically were we can no longer manufacture product because we're using all our equipment to work on some COVID-related projects. And so we're that's great for the world, sucks for us. And so we really had to kind of had to really step back and figure out okay, what are we going to do right now? And so what we saw was, in addition to really scrambling hard to find a new manufacturer, was that so we turned off all acquisition of the all advertising and customer acquisition efforts. And what we saw was that even though we did that, we saw that customers still were there. And so we reached out and we just started talking to people who kept buying the product. So we weren't growing, but we also weren't losing customers either. And so we were like, well, why are you buying this product? Because you're not going to any weddings or anything. And we learned this whole new narrative about the customer around like what they valued around their health and their healthy routines. Because during COVID, it's like you didn't have anything else to do, so you split a bottle of wine with your significant other and watch some TV or whatever, some Tiger King or whatever was going on at the time. But then you also were setting up your home gym and you were getting this whole health routine in place, right? And so it was really important that you could enjoy those moments, but then also you wouldn't disrupt your healthy routines the next day. And so those healthy habits and routines became like the core of our brand and the core of the value prop. And it was this huge pivot. And so we switched everything, and we switched our messaging and our positioning and our branding and everything to really kind of like align more with that. That was always a part of the brand, but it became the core of it. And so it was some dark days, I think, for everybody, not just at Zbiotics, and for March, April, May 2020. But kind of going into the summer, we were really like it was one of the best things ultimately that happened to our brand was finding that, because I think that was a much more resonant and resilient benefit than what we started with.
I actually discovered Zbiotics during the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, people actually started drinking more, I think.
They did, because there was nothing else to do, right? Like that was their, you couldn't go out and, there was a lot of stuff you couldn't do anymore. And so like it was easy enough to, get Drizzly to deliver some alcohol to your house and, and watch something on TV or whatever with your significant other, or do like a Zoom happy hour or something. So, yeah.
I have one last question. Do you still do like mad science experiments in the lab and experiment on yourself?
I always am experimenting on myself. I'll never not do that. No, I don't get to do too much time. I don't get to spend time in the lab anymore, and I miss it. It's it's my happy place. It's what I was trained to do. It's what I'm most qualified to do, and I definitely miss that part of the job. But we have much better scientists than me at Zbiotics now. So
yeah. Oh wow.
Yeah.
That's a humble thing to say.
Yeah.
I mean, if you could do like one mad experiment, what would you do?
I mean, I would love, if I could, I would just love to get back in the lab and build something new. Like I'd love to, we talked about that first year, like those early days of just building, like cloning and changing the bacteria and testing it and seeing what worked and see if we could, I'd love to just to do that again. That'd be really fun.
Would you clone yourself and modify your own DNA?
No, I wouldn't do that. No, because I'd probably make somebody better than me, and then, they were what I'd be.
Okay, yeah. Well, it's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming.
Totally.
Yeah. It
Thanks
was
for
a
having
great
me.
interview.
Yeah, totally.
Thank you.
Awesome.